When we think about the most dangerous jobs in royal times, we usually imagine soldiers on the battlefield. But in many cases in medieval Europe, there was a role that was far more dangerous because they were so close to power. They weren't soldiers. They weren't advisors either. They were court jesters, entertainers who lived between laughter and danger. The role of the jester dates back to ancient times, even before the medieval era. In the Roman Empire, there were already entertainers who performed for the elite. However, the jester's role developed significantly in Europe between the 12th and 17th centuries, especially in the kingdoms of England, France, and Spain. There were two main types of jesters: natural fools, individuals with certain mental or physical conditions; licensed fools, intelligent individuals trained to entertain. The second type is what we usually imagine today: quick-witted, clever, and skilled with words. Formally, jesters were entertainers, but in practice, their role was much more complex. In royal environments that were hierarchical and full of pressure, kings were often surrounded by people who always agreed with them. In social science, this is known as groupthink, where groups avoid conflict and criticism. This is where jesters became unique. They had a kind of social permission to criticize decisions, express unpopular opinions, even subtly embarrass the king, all wrapped in humor. In some cases, jesters became one of the most honest sources of feedback for rulers. However, it's important to understand there were no formal laws that truly protected jesters. Their freedom depended entirely on the king's mood, personal relationships, and the political climate. This meant the line between safe and dangerous was very unclear. Historical records show that some jesters lost royal protection, were punished for going too far, or were exiled from the court. Because their humor often touched sensitive topics: power, policy, and the ruler's ego. One of the most famous examples is Triboulet, who served King Louis XII and Francis I of France. Triboulet was known for his sharp intellect, but that sharpness also made him dangerous. According to historical accounts, he once insulted an important noble who demanded the penalty. The king agreed, but gave him one exception: Triboulet could choose how he would die. His response became a classic example of a jester's wit. He said, "I choose to die of old age." The answer was clever enough to make the king laugh, and he was ultimately pardoned. This story is often cited as an example of how humor can be a tool for survival. From a modern perspective, the role of a jester is similar to several professions today. Political comedians, satirists, even social critics and journalists. They use humor to criticize power, open discussions, express uncomfortable truths. The difference is, today there are legal protections in many countries. Jesters had none. Jesters were not just symbols of entertainment, but an important part of power dynamics in the past. They stood in a unique position, close enough to see the truth, brave enough to speak it, but vulnerable enough to be punished at any moment. In many ways, they remind us that even in the most authoritarian systems, there is always a small space for criticism, even if it must be delivered through laughter. And maybe the real question is, if you lived in that time, would you stay silent or take the risk of being a jester?